Welcome to the Filmmakers Life. This is my podcast that I do every other week. And I'm very, very excited today to have Nani Sahra Walker, who is a former client of mine. And as always, in our discussion, we're going to learn about how she got into filmmaking. And this particular podcast is for filmmakers who realize that they need to raise money to make their films. And if that is you, you have come to the right place. In the filmmaker's life, we're learning from the success of other filmmakers and how they made it through their first features and beyond. And so that's what we're here for. So today I would love to introduce you to Nani. And my first question, Nani, is always the same. I always ask, when did you first know you were a filmmaker?
Hi, Joanne. Thank you for having me here. So it's hard to pinpoint, I think, exactly when that was. I grew up in a digital age, and I think, in high school, I was doing some theater. I had gone to high school partially in the US and partially in Japan. And at the time when I was in Japan, yes, so I finished my high school in Sapporo, Japan, and I did some theater there, and it was very experimental. It was just us, the students kind of coming up with different takes on kind of classic plays. And one of those became a film, and I was an actor and producer in that, and was just really excited about storytelling using so many different mediums. I think for me, photography was kind of one of my first loves. I had done some painting before, dance, various different types of, I guess, creative expression, and really loved the bringing together of photography, or the visual arts and poetry in cinema. Um, and then really didn't go into film school immediately. I studied philosophy and religion in
Oh,
college.
wow. Oh my goodness. Now that makes a lot of sense. We'll get to that later. That makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense.
But again, I feel like that is also storytelling. And that's, I think, some of the major storytelling that we do as human beings. And so I wanted to spend the, 4 years of my college days reading the best stories. And I really felt like that was in philosophy, I guess, and religion. Um,
Huh.
yeah, I guess following that, I moved to New York City and lived there for the next 5 years and really, joined companies and productions and sets to really teach myself every
So
position
wait a minute.
possible.
I just missed something. So did you go to film school?
No, no, I did not.
No, you didn't. So you
No.
studied philosophy and religion, but then how did you transition into working in the industry? I
Well,
missed.
yeah, I mean, I moved to New York City. I joined a small animation company that was like three people at the time. And I became an assistant editor there, kind of learned
I'm
on the
still
job.
like, I just don't understand. How did you go from philosophy and religion to editing? There's
Um,
like, wait, there's like a missing piece.
well, I mean, again, I think that like to me, it was always storytelling or some form of
Uh-huh.
art, right?
Yes, yes.
And it was natural that, what was I going to do in New York City with a philosophy degree? Like, I don't know what else, but I think, yeah, joining a company and kind of learning something more practical made sense. So I went there, learned, Final Cut Pro at the time and After Effects, and stayed with the company for, I think, over a year.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you started out in animation. That's great.
Yes. Yes. And it was very exciting because at the time, we were working on Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11. And so I got to work on, some really major projects like that. And it was an incredible learning experience, and kind of first entry into the film world.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. And so, how did you go after the animation work? Did you stay in animation or did you make a switch?
No, I wanted to really get like a wide range of experience. And so that was all post, right? And I think I wanted to just be in production and be on
Uh,
set and really, get a sense of that. So I freelanced for the next several years and worked on many different things, including TV shows, commercials, short films. And it was great because I was just able to kind of pick up so many different skills and learn positions. And I think now being a director and producer, just having the appreciation and gratitude for every single person who shows up on a set is really the best film education that one can ask for.
do you remember some of the jobs you had? What kind of positions you had?
Oh yeah, like boom operator, most difficult position in the world. I have so much respect for people who operate the boom. Second AC, uh,
Uh-huh.
transportation, PA. So, driving trucks around New York City, it was really tough. A lot of PA work at that point, really, but there I did some ADing. So I kind of went from department to department, and have worked in pretty much every department, I would say, from yeah, camera, directing, art department, just production.
I've rarely heard people say they've been in the transportation department. So
Yes.
so what happened after that? When did you make a switch over to documentary film?
Well, I think, after kind of spending 5 years in New York, I realized that I really wanted to do some independent work. So I had gone and worked on many different productions. And again, I feel like that for me was kind of my film education. And then I moved out west, started a company, and traveled to Nepal to make my first feature documentary called Other Nature. And meantime, I did some short films here and there as well. I had made a short, and after the short, it was the feature. And I traveled to Nepal over the course of multiple years and followed the LGBTQ movement at the time and the inclusion of third gender citizens in the kind of constitution and in the, just citizenship kind of battle and whether that was going to be recognized or not. And it was a kind of landmark moment because Nepal really paved the way in the world. It was the first country to provide third gender citizenship. And this was back in 2008.
Wow, that's amazing. And what's your connection to Nepal? Because that seems a little random.
Yes. Well, I'm Nepali. My mom is Nepali. I'm born and raised in Nepal, and so I've spent a lot of time there and feel very connected.
So that's interesting. So you start what made you decide to start a company?
Um, I think it just, it was a natural kind of progression of working for other companies and then really just wanting to do my own independent work and saying, okay, I think this is the moment to do this not only as an individual and as a freelancer, but really establish myself as a company. Part of it is, I think, legal protections, but also just regular kind of business practices.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I think, have a very difficult time with that. A lot of people who are working in the industry and paying their bills through
Mhm.
the industry have a very hard time when they want to shift over to making their own work
Mhm.
because that's not bringing in the money at the beginning. Do you remember what that was like? How you dealt with
Yeah. I do. I mean, it's a little bit of a transition. I think, just finding those jobs, you've got to kind of go out there and just be, I think, more active, as opposed to just showing up on set, or for the call time. So, I went around and, I was also living in the Bay Area, which is, I think, a tougher place to be doing film production, period. But I did quite a few, jobs for either tech companies or universities. And I was at the same time really raising money to make my feature. And so a lot of the time I was focused kind of on the making of my film.
And how did you go about raising the money for your first feature?
Oh, every way possible. I mean, I worked three jobs. I, did crowdfunding campaigns at the time. We did just about everything possible to raise that and um, made it happen. I mean, I think, at the end of the day, um, I also applied to a lot of institutions and I think that at the end of the day, if you want to make a film, there are ways to just get it done. And a lot of times filmmakers wait for the institutional support, and those cycles are very long and few and far between. And so I love this idea of really being more proactive and, going out and seeking like-minded people or investors who are interested in kind of your um, either vision or approach or thematic area that you're kind of exploring in your film.
Was that partly how you raised the money for the feature? Was it people who were interested in that
Mhm.
citizenship process? And yeah,
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of the queer community here. And I just got like a lot of friends and people who were kind of involved, interested, friends, family, people in my circle to kind of engage with the film. And then they would call their friends and, just kind of create this community around the film and the making of the film.
I love that. One question I had wanted to ask you was that you have been in several labs,
Yes.
which I think is really interesting. Do you remember in what order things came in? Had you already made your first film before you got into one of the labs, or how did that get sorted out?
Yeah, actually it's interesting. I don't know if the timeline makes I think having some work to show definitely helps for those labs. And
Mm,
I'm now my first lab was actually the San Francisco Film Residency when that first
mhm.
began, and that was with Other Nature. And I'd done some shorts before that, so I hadn't done a feature before, but I think just having some work, some idea of like what your vision is like and what your kind of creative approach is helps a lot for people to see, you know, what um, what you're thinking about and how you like how strong your vision is.
And what did you get from that lab? I was around the SF film a lot, and I used to go to all their workshops and I'd meet all the filmmakers who were there. So I think it's a year-long residency, is that right?
Yes, I believe it
Yeah.
was a year long. It was quite a while back, but
Yeah.
I mean, I was still in production, so I don't know if I, got the full I took full advantage of that lab and what it had to offer. Um, but there was some space that was provided in the pier. There was kind of a co-working space with other filmmakers that were part of the lab, events and kind of networking opportunities with people who were connected to SF Film. I didn't have a ton of contact or really kind of engagement just because I was still in production and most of the time I was in Nepal still shooting or editing or so yeah, unfortunately that lab it kind of came and went in a sense. I mean, I'm still connected to some of the events and
Ah,
some of the
interesting. Mhm.
kind of just, community forums that were set up with that. Um, but I can't tell you how it's evolved or what it's like now.
No, 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 no. I just interested because you particularly have attended several labs, and I'm always encouraging my clients to apply. And I just wanted to hear what you thought about them. And there's the
Yeah.
sine qua non. I have
Yeah.
one client who did that one.
Yeah, well, I can talk more about that one. I mean, that one was more recent. So the
Mm.
Cinnamon Lab I attended a couple of years ago to rewrite my upcoming feature, Shakti, and it was during the pandemic, so unfortunately we weren't able to go to Mexico to do it in
Uh-huh.
person, which I think would have been incredible. But I was lucky enough to be able to, attend and do it from kind of the quiet setting of my home. And I think in a sense, that was a great lab because it was so intensive. It was very much driven towards writing. So it was a small group of people, other participants who would come, and we all kind of workshopped our scripts together. And over the course of, I think, a month or two, we basically worked intensely on our scripts. And the only reason I think that's a great kind of way to get into a script is because there's really this time set aside for it.
Mm.
Otherwise, there's always this kind of, well, I'll work on it, or, there's not much structure around it unless you're very disciplined, which I feel like in my writing, I'm not disciplined. It's like I can either just go, or then it's not like I write every day for X amount of time.
Yes, that's nice. So there are other ones as well. BAFTA,
Mhm.
that's the British one.
Yes, so
Yeah.
BAFTA was another writers group, and it was
Uh,
interesting because I was part of the BAFTA alumni, and during the pandemic, we all got together. There were a bunch of these events online, and just myself and like a group of, I think, five or six other writers, we ended up creating this writers group, and it was really a very helpful space for me again to just workshop my script with others. We all read each other's scripts, and each week we would spend time giving feedback on one person's script. And it was just so valuable to me because I feel like writing is a very lonely process, and sometimes you just get kind of lost in your own world. And so it's great to kind of come and, just engage with others around a piece of writing. And I think if you're able to find a really great group of writers, it's one of the best things about kind of, yeah, sharing and doing that collaborative process in something that is inherently somewhat like of a solo space.
that's great. Yeah, I've rarely had guests who've been to several labs, and it's just interesting. I feel as though they're a great way to augment your career and expand your network and your community. And it sounds as though that really has happened with all your experiences.
Yes, yes, certainly.
So how did you go from, so we've got to Nepal, you made your first feature film, your first documentary, and I know at some point I know that you started working for the LA Times. How did that happen?
That was some years later. So I actually found one of my co-producers in Spain. I went to Spain, finished that feature in Spain. So, again, when you ask about how you raise money to finish or make a film, the beginning was production, a lot of crowdfunding, and just, my own investments. And then really towards the end, I was looking to do the post-production and the finishing work. And I found a co-producer in Spain. I went there, I lived there for a couple of years, finished the film, and then I moved out
Were
to,
you were you able to take care of their take advantage of their tax incentives? Did
I
that play a
wasn't because
role?
I
Yeah.
didn't really invest in
Uh-huh, right.
Spain. It was a co-production agreement where all of it was in-kind services coming from the Spanish side.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And so after that, I moved back to the States. I moved to LA, and I guess let's see. I joined the LA Times some years later, but basically have been kind of between LA and the Bay Area um, at that point, and started really kind of working more in journalism. So using kind of my filmmaking and filmmaking skills towards kind of docs and just going back to nonfiction. Um, and then when I moved back to LA in 2015, sorry, in 2019, I guess that's when I joined the LA Times.
What made you decide to give up your life of freelance work to go and work for a company?
Good question. I mean, I think that, it's great to have like many different experiences and joining this kind of like large institution. And, this was, I think for me, that was kind of an opportunity to see the inner workings of this like really massive machine. They were also starting a kind of studios division, and there was a lot of kind of, investment in, um, digital media, new media, in, kind of film, and possibly like doing long form and short form and various things. And so that was exciting to me. And I thought, this is great. Like, this is also a great way to re-enter a city, is to kind of go through a place like the LA Times. And, I was in the beginning kind of doing various different things, including immersive work, kind of experimenting with some immersive in food, and exploring Los Angeles through food. And there's no better way to do that. So yeah, it was an exciting time. And I think also, again, like working at a bigger company, for me, I think that is a little bit of that same type of education of, okay, starting a company, being, a kind of one person show, to going to a company with 500 plus people, and then seeing companies in varying sizes, and seeing, okay, what is the kind of vision I have for myself and for a future company of my own.
Mhm. Um, when you joined the what year did you join the LA Times?
2019.
2019. Was that sort of when all of the major news outlets started their video divisions? Was it that sort of time when that was a new thing, that you could go and look at video of the
Yeah.
newspaper?
A little later, I would say,
Like,
but still, yes. So still during this kind of exciting age of, okay, these legacy papers, which are just so print oriented, saying,
yes,
okay, we've got to wake up, because really a lot of them were folding.
right.
People aren't going to papers anymore. It was just becoming like this kind of relic of the past. And so I was hired really to kind of come in and ramp up some of the, you know, storytelling that is on the visual side, right? Whether it was video, immersive. I had also talked at an early interview about short documentaries, and starting something that, could be a curation of short documentaries that other filmmakers and creators are out there are making, and that we could just be a kind of platform for. And that was something that I ended up doing, from the last 2, 3 years of my time at the LA Times. I headed the short documentary platform.
Mhm. So, what kind of short documentaries would you look for? What would
Well,
what was the LA Times interested in?
yeah, I guess the way that we had branded it was always this kind of West Coast perspective, but really some documentary with, I would say, some unique voice. A lot of times underrepresented filmmakers, just trying to make space, I think, for films and filmmakers that really were often getting left behind or having to look elsewhere. And most of the times it was the East Coast. And so, we're at the heart of kind of like Hollywood here, but then there's no real space for like documentaries or for filmmakers in the short space, which is often either the experimental or the kind of starting off place, right? And there are, some people who make it their entire careers to stay in the short space, and
Right.
that's, but that's often rare to find a person like that.
Yeah, and I know you were saying your background is journalism, but what were these shorts journalistic pieces, news pieces?
No,
Uh,
often with a really kind of creative, I would say, approach, and
uh-huh.
yeah, with I mean, a unique perspective. I mean, it was kind of a creative documentary, I would say, rather
Yeah.
than like
Okay.
the, journalistic
Yeah.
style.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you come to the last repair shop? So the last repair shop is we shared a link so that people could see it before this interview. Um, it's a film that's made such a huge impact on me, and I'm still kind of like what this film is just mind-blowingly good. So how did you get to work on that project?
Good question. Well, so when we had just launched the short documentary platform back in 2021, I want to say 2022, sorry, 2022. I think we had worked with Breakwater Studios, the company that produced The Last Repair Shop, in another film called The Beauty President. And that film, The Beauty President, was kind of our pilot piece that we used to test out, okay, short documentaries, what is it going to look like? What does this kind of Oscar campaign look like? What does the filmmaker relationship look like? All of that. And around that time, I had seen the first cut of The Last Repair Shop, and it was a wildly different film from what it turned out to be. But, it was still this very strong film that was anchored in LA, had, some great, I think, emotionally resonant stories of people from The Last Repair Shop. And, I think at that point we had thought, okay, this is a great film. Let's send back some notes. And I had sent my notes, it was very clear to me that there were certain things that could have been improved and whatnot. And fast forward a couple of years, and the team is kind of ready, with their new cut and their final cut. And film is premiering at Telluride, and here we are, like presented with, this contract to kind of see if we want to bring it on to the LA Times. And so a lot of the efforts on the contract side were done by my colleague, Leslie Lindsay. And, the two of us really kind of, I think, spearheaded that film through the LA Times and all of the red tape and the loopholes and, all the naysayers. I mean, it was just full of so much kind of so many obstacles, so much to kind of push through, but I'm really proud that we did it. And, I think it was something that came to our table very early on, and we um, we supported it. There was still some work to do. It was kind of like, okay, let's keep tracking this project and follow it. And then by the end, it was a wonderful team effort. I mean, so many people worked on that project. And, I think just kind of championing a project like that, where again, it's very much a kind of collaborative, like team effort is really fun to do.
So you were saying that even with The Beauty President, you were thinking about an Oscar run.
Yes, we had kind of pushed for a campaign, and we did that for several other films. The following year, they were FYC eligible, and then we would do these screenings and kind of, try to just gain traction for those films. And so I had that experience for the last couple of years, really. I think, well, let's see, actually, let's say 3 Oscar seasons where it was really like pushing for, a film and kind of following the campaign for for a film through the fall and early winter Oscar craze that happens here in LA.
So with The Last Repair Shop, I mean, I'm shocked to hear that there was what did you call it? Naysayers on The Last Repair Shop,
Oh
because
yeah, yes, there were, and I will not forget. I won't, expose them publicly like in this forum, but oh, certainly. I mean, they're naysayers, and I feel like on any project, and I think this is why the people who back and support and finding those people who really are behind your project, because I've seen it happening um in those so-called executive spaces, right? Where people are not necessarily attuned to projects or what is good or what is, like they're not really tuning in, but it's just this kind of judgmental, very like political game. And sometimes, you know, being in those spaces is important to learn that, wow, this is not all about, you know, how good your film is, right? There's going to be a lot of people out there who have other agendas. And yeah, that was very insightful to me because I felt like, oh, this is also important to be aware of and to
Mm.
be able to kind of drown out that noise and say, you know what? This is something I believe in. This is something I think is great. If we have a chance at anything, this is the one. And to really just drive that home and to fight for what you believe in.
So what I've been dying to get to ask you about this film is, I call it a three cry movie, because to
Mhm.
me, you know, the ultimate is if you cry at a movie. So this is like a three cry movie for me. And the question I've been wanting to ask you about the film is, um, what, I don't even know how to ask the question. Why is this film so powerful?
Mhm.
It's so powerful and so moving, and the heart that comes out of the film is really palpable. So I just wonder if you could tell me a little bit about how it has managed to achieve that.
Mhm. Well, I don't know if I have the answer for this question, but I think, you know, any good documentary, any good story really is about the kind of emotional heartbeat of the film. And I think that this one really reaches those depths with the stories of Patty, with the stories of the other um, last repair shop, you know, repair people. Um, I mean, I just think that each person has this unique story, and there is something painful and also resilient in each of their stories. And I think in this sense, that is the human experience. And so, you know, we're able to see it not just in one person and say, oh, okay, this is just the story of this one person that's being singled out in a film. But it's like randomly in this workplace, there are these stories and there are these people who come together all with their own, you know, past experiences and come here for this kind of um, one mission or one reason to be, right? And that is this really kind of, I think, almost meditative workplace because they're there, they're fixing these instruments. And, you know, I think it's also this kind of altruistic story that is so rare nowadays because our world is full of so much violence and so much strife and so much you know, domination and just this kind of really, I think it's rare that we get to see and feel those stories. And I believe that's probably why it touches the hearts of
Yeah,
people.
that's true. The altruism, the people who work in the repair shop each comes to this place from very, very different
Hmm.
parts of the world. And they come here and they are very clear that they're there for altruistic reasons. And then when we see the children on the other side, the children who get to play the instruments,
Hmm.
and so we see the impact of that altruism on the children and
Right.
the transformation of music for those children.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, it's a stunning movie. I've had a lot of people watch it because I keep talking about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So you and I met, I've forgotten how long ago, and you had this clearly, you know, huge background in documentary filmmaking, but you were planning on making your first feature.
Mhm.
And so tell us a little bit about your feature film, Shakti, and where it's at, and uh, the fun that we had.
Yes. Well, so while I was at the LA Times, the great thing is that we get to take these book leaves or what's called a book leave. And I was able to take a film leave and go and make a film my first feature narrative film, Shakti, and it's about a mother and daughter fighting for justice in Nepal. And so I went last year to shoot the film and have been in post-production for the last kind of 9 months to a year, really. And am now, in the process of kind of festival, figuring out what our premiere and that whole side of things, and yeah, looking for kind of marketing distribution opportunities, and our final stretch before sharing it with the world.
When roughly what time period do you think the premiere will be? Would
I
it be
believe
this
this
year?
fall.
In the fall
Yes.
of this year. That's fantastic. So when you were raising the money for this film, you were looking for investors, and how did it work for you finding investors for this film? Because it's very, very specific. It's in Nepal, it's in Nepalese, it deals with a very particular topic.
Yeah.
How did you connect with investors for this film?
Yeah. Well, so many different ways, I think. And I do believe that on a bigger project like this is probably the biggest budget that I have raised so far in my career. And this means that, I really I went down every possible route. So go to foundations, go to, camera companies, go to film markets, go to labs. I mean, try to do everything. And then I also have invested the majority of the money in the film. So it's self-funded, but I did find one major investor who came in pretty significantly. And he was somebody that I met through really through kind of personal networks. And, he really believed in the cause, especially the community that I was telling the story about, the Dalit community. And he felt like, this is such an important story. And he wanted to put in, this significant chunk. And again, I mean, I think finding people who believe in your vision, um, your message, your storytelling, or the themes that you're touching upon are so important. And so sometimes, people look at these big major institutions, right? Like Sundance, and it's like, oh, if I can't get support from Sundance, I'll never make a film. But that's really not true at all. Because you'll have a much better chance making a film going out and doing it in a way in this kind of, private, like finding investors than waiting for the Sundances in the world to kind of support your film. And so, I think it was really liberating for me because again, I think, so many times as filmmakers, we're looking for validation from the outside and from these, institutions. And having worked at a kind of major institution, I really understood that it was not always about the quality of the film. A lot of times there were political choices made. There were a lot of people in the room, like I had said about The Last Repair Shop, that were naysayers. There's so many other factors that it's
Mhm.
not a good compass to use for like your film, and not, definitely not a good gauge for the validation of your film or for your creative vision. And so really for me, it was about taking it in my own hands and going and raising the money on my own, knowing that I had a very important story to tell, something that I really wanted to do. And, again, drowning out that noise of like, okay, is it, do I need to have this stamp of approval? Do I need to have that stamp of approval? The only stamp of approval that you need is your own if you want to go and do it. And you've got to do that for yourself.
That is fantastic. Yes, the only one who can greenlight your film is you.
Yes, yes.
And working with your investor, who was very interested in the topic and in the story, how involved have they been? Because I think a lot of filmmakers are scared
Mhm.
about having somebody put money into their films. What's that relationship been like?
Yeah. Well, I think that, if you establish that early on, my relationship with my investor is very hands off in the sense that, he's not making any creative decisions. I will say that because he or she they're not making any creative decisions. But I do share, I share cut, and I think that for me is a way of showing them that, look, your money is going towards something. We're actually done with an edit. And, not at every stage by any means, but I do like to share the fact that I'm so excited about, how far we've gotten. And here we are. Look, this is like a really solid, like fine cut. And I sent a fine cut over, um, not every cut. And I think that we also have this agreement that, that's not going to be the kind of creative side will be up in my hands, and that will be, and I mean, they've been really supportive and very understanding of that. um and so I'm quite grateful.
Which cut did I see? How far along in the process? Did I see a rough cut or did I see, because that was a few months ago.
Yeah, you probably saw something like between the rough and fine time
Uh-huh,
period.
uh-huh.
So it's still changed. It's changed quite a bit probably since then. I mean,
Ah.
I would say wholly structurally, not so much, but sure, there's, like the pacing, the rhythm, the mood, the music. I mean, I think everything has kind of really come together, like to in its complete stage, right? And during the process, it's like you're so close, it feels good, it feels better, it feels, and I think just keep going with that feeling, because I know for myself, I'm very impatient. I just want to be like done, already, and move on to the next, because I mean, as we all know, like films take so many years, and it's a huge undertaking, but it is part of that process, and I think it kind of grounds me as well, just to be like, okay, you know what, it's getting better even with these little minor changes, and holding out a bit and just being patient with it and riding that wave.
Well, when I saw the cut that I saw was beautiful. The film is beautiful. And one of the things that you told me was that you had been able to really bring your documentary experience into this fiction film. And I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit, because often documentary filmmakers want to go into fiction and they feel so as if they're unprepared and that it's not, something that they're ready to do. And I just wondered if you could talk to that a little bit.
Sure. Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, it's mostly fiction, but I do think there's some hybrid elements. First of all, it's really driven by a kind of social impact campaign, and really, aiming to make some major social change. So that element is very much, I think, informed by documentary. The other is the fact that, there were certain sets where we just entered, and my cinematographer Keiko Nakahara was 7.5 months pregnant with this massive RE35 camera, and huge anamorphic lenses, and she was hand holding that in Pashupati Temple, which is this ancient temple with 5,000 people plus probably on that day, where every night there's an arti, which is a kind of a celebration at sundown. And we were filming this. And so that felt very much like guerrilla documentary filmmaking. Although we were a big team, and, there was sometimes like our crew members were in the shot, and it was like, get out, like we've got to just keep things moving. We had such limited time. I mean, it was an event that happens once. We didn't go and shoot it multiple times. We did it all in one night. And so that was a kind of incredible and spectacular undertaking. And I think that, being fluid and being experienced with the kind of doc style helped me to let go that night, and to say, okay, it's okay that, not everything is set up, not everything is like completely under control, and in that way in which I think fiction and kind of, those sets are built. But I think there was a beauty to it because that energy of the 5,000 people and that kind of like just rawness would not have been possible to build, even if you had the budget to do so.
Right. Yeah. When I saw the film and I was like, but how did Nani get thousands and thousands of people? And it was that they were already there and then you worked around that and worked for it. It was awesome. I can't wait for everybody to see this film. It's called Shakti and it's going to be coming out soon. So let's see if anybody has any questions. Come on camera, raise your hands. If anybody has a question. I think one of the things I was thinking about about your investors with this film, so they're not involved in the creative decisions, but will they attend the premieres and things like that? Because I think that that's where investors can really have fun on a movie. You know, they can come to see the premiere, they can participate in things like that.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do.
I'm sure they will. Tatiana.
Hello, hello. Thank you for this. And Nani, so nice to meet you. I mean, your story's incredible. The Last Repair Shop, my daughter and I just watched it. Cried, definitely more, maybe 3, 4 cries. Um, so I'm actor turned filmmaker from the Philadelphia region, and I am 8 years into my first feature-length documentary about a Haitian master painter. So I appreciate your wisdom about just taking the time. It's going to take as long as it's going to take. You don't need the validation of the labs, and that you were just determined to get the funding and make the film. So I think I needed to hear that today. So thank you for that. I know Joanne is like, that is her messaging and that's her expertise. And I think sometimes it's still really easy to get in your head about making that phone call, finding that person who is in alignment with the story that you're looking to tell. I've also written my first narrative screenplay about called Christmas Crossing, about a 11-year-old Black girl who discovers her ancestor helped Washington cross the Delaware and then wants to join in the reenactment that happens every year at Christmas. So what you were just talking about, filming in the festival, is very interesting to me because our scene involves getting this little girl in a boat at this reenactment that happens and thousands of people come. And so I have wrestled with, do we create a boat? Do we just put her in there? What were some of the challenges? I mean, you talked about kind of letting go, but can you talk just a little bit about the practical application of either how you prepared or what surprised you about going in and actually filming that day? And kudos to your cinematographer. I'm a mom. I cannot even imagine 7 months pregnant. Filming there, but or even when you came back and looked at what you captured, how did you navigate the vision, having to let go and going documentary style, and
Yeah,
realize that?
thank you for sharing. And I'm so happy that, you know, any of what I said is resonating. I think at every stage, I do believe that at every stage with every person that we speak to, where we can kind of like, you know, realize that, oh, there's something that they're going through, which is helpful for me in this moment as well. Um, in terms of your, let's see, in terms of kind of the shoot at the temple and what might be helpful to you. Sorry. Let's see. I think so. We went many times. I don't know if you're able to do that where you can go many times before to see it. And
I'm not sure I understand.
Is that me?
no, I think
I'm going to mute just in
Siri
case.
knows many things.
my Siri is going insane. Okay. Just off Siri, off. So yeah, I mean, we went many times to experience that event or that ceremony, and we without camera, just go and sit there and try to figure out like where does it make sense for us to be, you know? knowing that it was going to be packed. I mean, absolutely packed full of people. And then we spoke to kind of the temple grounds people and the organizers and tried to, I think, really, see if they would be cooperative with us, right?
Right.
And that was really important because the night of the shoot, the person kind of leading the ceremony, it was amazing because he got onto his microphone and he was kind of like, we're making a film tonight. It's called Shakti, and this is going to be like the greatest thing. Everybody, and it, we were just shocked, like, what? This is amazing. And the whole place was there with us making the film. And it really felt like this incredible energy, right? Of like everybody just saying, okay, we're gonna do what you need us to do and just cooperate. So I would say go if you're able to go many times before, and if there are people there, organizers, anybody that you can work with to kind of help you, almost like put you at ease a bit.
Okay.
And then, I mean, I think, let's see, in some ways, again, like if you're already making a documentary, right? Like, I think it's okay that the style or, for us, I think what was interesting was that it was fiction and these kind of scenes where it was just like, okay, 5,000 people, we have no,
Right.
we're just here. Like, we're just here with a camera. We're one other person.
Mm.
I think if you're already in the doc style and trying to understand your visual approach or your aesthetic, and
Right.
how does that work when you're not able to necessarily do exactly the same thing as you have done in other scenes.
Okay.
And it could become like an intentional, like more movement in camera, or, how you are just going to kind of mix those settings.
I
Awesome.
was wondering, because you were saying how the people at the temple were actually very, very supportive. And I was imagining that with the reenactment, that it would be really fun for them to know that somebody's making a movie and
Yes.
the story. And, I think that people tend to react very, very positively when you say, I'm making a film.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you both. I'm so glad I stopped everything to be here today.
Yay, so good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and all the best with your film.
Thank you so much. And yours too. Can't wait to support it when it comes out.
Thank you.
Now that you have been through the process of watching a film go through the Oscar run, do you feel as though you know how to guide that process with Shakti? Is that something that's still on the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think having done it in different category, there are obviously different rules and regulations, but I think that is something that we kind of have in the back of our minds, and really are thinking, in terms of how to bring this to a greater audience. And you see with The Last Repair Shop, for instance, just even getting that exposure. I mean, short documentaries, generally speaking, nobody knows, who won the Oscar for the short documentary 3 years ago. I mean, no idea, right? And I think the awards kind of give it this possibility of just greater exposure, which is wonderful for social impact. And that is really, I think, at the forefront of our minds.
Do you think that you'll also have like an impact campaign that you might have as if it had been a documentary?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. Because I think that that's another thing that fiction filmmakers can learn from the documentary world, is that an impact campaign can take the film to very different places. It doesn't just have to be, traditional distribution.
Right.
Manos, please come and ask your question.
Oh, I see it in the chat. Hello.
Oh,
Let's see, my motivation for making the film in Nepal about Nepali people. I'm Nepali. I guess that's my biggest motivation. Also, I mean, this particular film, you know, in 2020, when I started writing the film, I came to realize that in 2014, basically the statute of limitations in Nepal for reporting any kind of assault, sexual assault, violence was 35 days. And that was like this appalling thing to me. And so I really wanted to, you know, address that and make some impact on that side.
Manos, where are you joining us from? Oh, we're not hearing you. We don't hear you.
Are you calling on me?
Oh, yes, now I can hear you. Yeah. Where are you?
Mike Camoin, upstate New York, and my back porch.
No, Manos. I'm talking
I'm
to
so sorry.
Manos. Where are you calling in from, Manos? We're not hearing you, I'm afraid. There's something wrong with the sound because you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm hearing you. But then you muted yourself. I know Manos is calling in from somewhere far away, so there we go.
Hey, hello.
Yes. Where are you?
Did you hear me?
Yes. Where are you?
Sorry
from?
for the interruption.
Where are you calling in from?
I'm from Bangladesh.
From Bangladesh. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, and thank you, Nani. I'll also join you. I'm very good fan of you. Regularly, I join with you, but I talk little low. But I like your program.
Thank you, Manos. Good, always good to have you. I love that we're so international.
Yeah. One last question to Nani. So, did your research about the I'm very fascinated about like you live in another country and making film in Nepal. So it is very fascinating to me to know about the writing process a bit, like how much you did research about the film and before the writing. So I want to hear from a bit about the issue.
Sure. Well, I did do quite a bit of research and then, you know, started writing. I did my writing here in the US, so I wasn't doing the writing in the place where I shot the film in Nepal. And I guess, does that answer your question?
Yeah. About making the film, you need local support. So, so you did manage. How did you manage the support from Nepali people, or did you have local producer? Or
Yes. So I had some co-producers. I also had some very good line producers who have worked on international projects for multiple years. And you know, I think just working with those producers on the ground was important to making the film because I know what you mean. I think that, you know, there's this kind of image of like people coming in from the outside and making films, right? You know, it's a little bit more complex for me. I'm kind of an insider outsider. And in a sense, I think that, you know, complexity of my POV really is what I want to bring to the film. And I'm very aware of it and intentional about it. And, you know, in terms of the writing, I wrote in English and I worked with all my actors and in a way to find the most natural language, not just in terms of, you know, the writing itself, but also in terms of character and how we were able to kind of workshop. So a lot of that was done during our workshops.
okay.
Thank you,
I got
Manos, so much.
I got my answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manos. Good to see you. Mike, go ahead.
Nina, congratulations. as a child, I've always watched the Oscars, always wanted to get there. I was wondering if you could talk about what your dreams were, what your expectations were, and what actually was like to be at the Oscars.
Thank you,
Oh.
Mike. Thank you. Yeah, I think, it's a big dream, right? For filmmakers, that's kind of, the biggest validation in a sense. It's like, all right, you've got an Oscar. I mean, it was exhilarating. It was definitely really amazing to be able to celebrate that moment. Um, and at the same time, I feel like, we have to keep continuing, and it doesn't, I mean, the challenges of making a film are still challenging, right? It's not like, oh wow, because of this one moment or this one moment of recognition, like everything just, gets that much easier. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think, we can probably ask multiple Oscar winners, and I've heard this from actors as well. It's like, okay, you may get it, you may get more work, you may get more people approaching you, but the kind of inherent experience of what it takes to make a new film, to write a new script, to go into a new project, all of that, it's the same process. And so it was incredible. I mean, I think to answer your question, like, of course, the night was exhilarating, right? I think just being able to celebrate, it was, one of the most kind of memorable nights of my career.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great question, Mike. I didn't think to ask that question. That was great. Thanks. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. Nani, what an inspiring interview. This was really wonderful to hear about the integrity and the quality of the work that you're doing. But that there's kind of a throwaway in this story that I'm trying to get a pick up on, and that is that you're in Nepal, you're doing this international film. There's social justice issues, there's spiritual issues. And then you said, oh yeah, so I moved to Los Angeles. I'm going, how does that work? I mean, I'm winning the Academy Award. That certainly probably gets people to pick up the phone. But how have you found the transition to being in LA? Has it been helpful, or do you feel like that there's someplace else where you might have more spiritual affinity? I'm just curious.
Thank you, Mark. Such a great question. I mean, I think LA has always been this kind of place that attracts so many different people, and also a hotbed of spiritual movements, right? So, in its own way, I think LA is really spiritual. I mean, it's a lot of people believing in something, and there's something great about that. Also, the proximity to nature, to the beach, the desert, the mountains. I mean, everything is so close to here. In terms of being, having to be in LA, I don't think that's the case. I used to think that in my early 20s, that, unless you were in New York, you weren't an artist, and that was just that kind of naivety, right? And I think after having moved away from New York, I was like, wow, there's so much the world has to offer. And, I was missing out on all of this, like in this complete, kind of brainwash of that idea. And I think that many people think that about LA in terms of being, having to be here to do films. Of course, almost every person I speak to, or many people I speak to, are somehow adjacent to the film industry, but that's changing drastically. And I think especially in the last year or so, and post-pandemic, really, so even more than the last year, a lot of people are considering moving away from LA, and considering if this really is sustainable anymore, because I think there's just there's no guarantee by being here, and the cost of living is quite high, and you know, if you see what's kind of happening in terms of the numbers and just what's happening in the industry, there are a lot of people out of work. And so I don't know if there's another place. I do think that there are many spiritual places in the world, and I'm certainly somebody who wants to be, you know, I like exploring, let's say, those, you know, kind of power spots. But I also have my own practice, and so I think wherever I am is where, you know, where I'm comfortable.
I grew up in LA in the 50s, and I'm now live and work in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which has been voted one of the top 4 places to be a filmmaker in America. So I've always been outside of the mainstream, you know, just working on independent projects.
I thought you were going to say Santa Fe's been voted the #1 power spot for spiritual. That's
Me
what I
too.
thought you
I
were
was like,
gonna
well, I
say.
know
Well,
about Sedona,
well,
but is it?
it's a huge spiritual community here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm involved or related to some of them, and of course we're dealing with I'm doing a film on Native American issues, and you know, there's so much of a different culture that it's very exciting to be around it.
I just need to interrupt because I have to get to my next class that I'm teaching. I'm teaching a class on pitch decks, and I want to let Mike ask his last question. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Joanne, for having this. And Nani, it's great to meet you. My question's pretty basic. You mentioned that you saw an early cut of Last Repair Shop, which I happened to see and I loved. I'm just wondering, how did it differ from the finished product, and what was your role in helping to shepherd it to what we get to see on the big screen?
Well, I mean, I think you know, it was different in the sense that some of those characters, in fact, many of the younger characters, let's just say, weren't part of that film. And you know, I think for me that was so important to have like the generation of the musicians. And I mean, you know, I think in any film you get notes from a lot of people. I'm sure I'm not the first person who said that. And you know, having spoken to kind of other friends and people from the network, and collaborators, you know, other people thought the same thing. And so I think once you hear a kind of a note that keeps, you know, keeps coming back, right, many times, then it's something to consider and always try. I mean, for myself, like I try, you know, if somebody's giving me a note and it's like I've heard it more than once, I'll try it. I'll sit with it, I'll watch it again, and then I'll make my decision based on, you know, having tried it, right? Rather than kind of completely shutting the door. So that's really the biggest change, you know, from the first cut that I saw.
So there were reshoots, or they had it and they just
Yes.
didn't know what to do with it?
Oh yeah, no, there were reshoots. I mean, all the musicians, the younger musicians were all filmed.
Good to see you, Mike. Nani, thank you so much for doing
Thank you.
this. And
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for coming.
And I owe you an email because you wrote to me and had a question, and I had the flu and now I have COVID. So I haven't been on top of things recently. But it's so great. I can't wait to find out when the premiere is going to be.
Yes, thank you.
It's so exciting that that Shakti is going to be coming out soon. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. So I can't wait for everybody to see it. And thank you again. And thank you, Emily, for shepherding us all through all of this. And thanks everybody for asking your questions and listening and joining us today. Take care. Bye, everybody.